20th of 2021. My partner and I were driving in the ambulance, and it was 12 o'clock at night, and we were coming to Indian Head, and we were just chit-chatting. And the way that we sit in the ambulance, we sit higher than the dashboard. So the way that the windshield is, it was kind of flat. And just, we both saw it wasn't out of the corner of our eye. The way the headlights were aiming was down a little, but we saw something black, all black, head to toe, run across the road in 3 steps. We couldn't see shoes, no socks, just all black. And the way it ran looked what I describe as like when you're gonna do the triple jump and you do that real high step, that's what it looked like. But in 3 steps, it was across the road. Instantly, my hair on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't see anything off to my right going up a very steep embankment. And I didn't want to say anything to my partner at first, but I finally said, "Did you just see that?" And he said, "Yes." I wasn't going to say anything either. And we just started talking about it. I immediately called my husband and said, "We just saw something cross the road." And I'm not saying it was Bigfoot, but it was Bigfoot.
What is it about a mystery that attracts us to it? Like a moth to a flame, we can't seem to stop our desire to know the answers. And in our never-ending quest for the truth, sometimes what we find contradicts what we think of as possible. But what happens when unexplained phenomena congregate into a singular geographic region? What happens when mysteries multiply? The Chestnut Ridge is one such location where all the things that go bump in the night collide. But many casual observers are blissfully unaware. They are drawn to the rolling forests of the Chestnut and Laurel Ridges, the running rivers and scenic parks of the Laurel Highlands, the mountain views, ski resorts, and sites of historical significance, and over 500,000 people call the area home and go a lifetime without having an encounter with the unexplained, at least that they're willing to talk about.
The Chestnut Ridge is the furthest western ridge of the Allegheny Mountains, or Appalachian Mountains, and it's a glacial ridge that runs from Indiana County into Preston County, West Virginia. It's about 80 miles long, maybe 10 miles wide, made up of limestone, quartz, coal. There's a lot of former coal mining communities that are all scattered throughout the ridge.
At one time, this area was very wild, and I don't think a lot of people understand how wild this was. In 1920, the chestnut tree reigned supreme. This was a tree that grew to 100 foot tall, 10 feet around, and it was where the Chestnut Ridge got its name from. In 1920, there was a fungus that was imported from the east and that decimated the entire population. Not only decimated, but it made the chestnut tree now extinct. But before that time, before the time whenever the chestnut tree had vanished, this area was home to the woodland bison up into the late 1700s, which was larger than the plains bison of today. This was a place of elk and deer and wolves and mountain lion. It was a very wild place. And as the men encroached, we're looking at probably in some areas third growth forest in some places. And without the chestnut tree being there, we are seeing only a shadow of what this area used to be.
Very steep ravines and things like that, a lot of rock outcroppings. There are a lot of caves. Actually, the Chestnut Ridge is very full of caves. Actually, it's something I used to do as a hobby. We used to be cavers, and you get up into the dairy area where there's been a ton of sightings. There's hundreds of caves up in that area, and it's all the limestone. That's probably one of the biggest things that the Chestnut Ridge is the limestone outcroppings. And the deep river valleys like the Youghiogheny River, the Conemaugh River cut through the ridges, and they create these huge valleys, but everything's heavily wooded, very, very rural back roads with little patch coal towns from back in the 1800s is what most of it is.
I guess the phenomenon really didn't start to be reported until Stan started investigating it in the 1960s and the 1970s.
Stan Gordon is an investigator whose work has concentrated on the Chestnut Ridge for decades, and his research, conducted with objectivity and an eye for detail, has raised more questions than answers.
My name's Stan Gordon. I'm from Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and I started this in 1959 when I was 10 years old. I was a curious kid interested in science and electronics, and it was during Halloween that I happened to be listening to a radio show, and they were talking about strange occurrences from flying saucers, strange creatures, haunted houses, and I was a curious kid and I wanted to know if these people were making these stories up or telling the truth. And that's how I got involved. I began cutting articles out of the newspaper, made scrapbooks, and I was 16 years old when the incident happened near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. And after that happened, I began to go out into the field to investigate these incidents. And there was a small group in Pittsburgh called the UFO Research Institute. And it was a small group of some scientists and engineers, and that was the group Stanton Friedman started with. But I was the youngster of the group, but I already had a lot of experience interviewing people, so I became their telephone sighting coordinator. So when they would get a report, I'd do the initial interview and determine if the case warranted further investigation. So I stayed with them till they shut down their operation, and in 1969 I decided to set up a hotline for the public to report UFO sightings. And it became apparent very quickly this was a lot more than I could handle on my own. So I decided I was going to try to set up a volunteer research group to investigate the reports. So in 1970, I founded the first group that was a Westmoreland County UFO study group. We started in my hometown of Greensburg. We moved into the Pittsburgh area, and by 1973, we were covering the whole state of Pennsylvania. And the group was kind of unique in that the majority of people involved were specialists. We had scientists, we had engineers, we had technicians and police officers, former military people, all kinds of specialists that volunteered around our full-time jobs to investigate these reports.
However, Stan Gordon and his Westmoreland County UFO study group were not alone in their investigative endeavors. Soon to arrive on the scene were figures like Dr. Paul Johnson and Sam Sherry.
Sam Sherry, probably one of them. Bob France is a name a lot of people don't know, but he was kind of a low-key researcher, lived out on the ridge. I think he still lives in a camper on the ridge, actually. Very interesting man, great stories, found some immense footprints, but he has stories for days about Bigfoot. Really nice guy, older guy. I hope he's still around. I haven't heard anything from him from a year or two. Him and Sam probably ran concurrently at the same time. Dr. Paul Johnson is another one who investigated not just the UFO flap that happened, but also the Bigfoot sightings throughout all up and down the Chestnut Ridge.
Dr. Paul Johnson, he was a former chemist at Duquesne. He retired now. He's like one of our mentors for our organizations. He helps us out. He started to research after he took over Stan's old group, the Pennsylvania Center for UFO Research. He started out researching UFOs, and then he started researching the Bigfoot phenomena through his group. He wondered, he's like, how could a Bigfoot be here? And he later came up with the quantum theory that this creature exists when it's being seen, but where does it go when it's not being seen? He does not believe that this is a real flesh and blood creature, say like a bear out in the woods. Some other people call it like the paranormal theory, interdimensional.
Stan Gordon, of course, none of this really would have gotten as much attention without Stan Gordon. And you know, you could add Eric Altman to that list now too, somebody who's been really stomping the ridge for 20 years or more now. That's kind of keeping the traditions alive and investigating the research around here.
Founded in 1998 by Steve Anderson and Harry Benton, the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society was created to collect and investigate reports all over the state.
Eric Altman took over in the early 2000s and built a group pretty much from just a handful of believers into a pretty large network of investigators, having over 100 members at one point in time. That just didn't investigate Pennsylvania. Some of them were spread out across the country, and they would feed information back to the group. It still is in existence to this day in a different form. I'm a member of the organization still, but for the longest time it was the preeminent research group in the state. It funneled in an awful lot of research material, a lot of sightings, a lot of expeditions. It was quite the organization.
The general public does not know the amount of time, effort, money spent on researching these strange phenomena, and most of the time you get grief, you get laughed at by friends and coworkers, by family. We're all trying to do the same thing, folks. We're just trying to look at a mystery, seeing what's there, seeing what's fake, seeing what's real, because we're all passionate about it. All the researchers up here, the researchers we deal with, they are very passionate about what they do. And I just wish like the general public maybe would, be a little more kind to them occasionally.
Whenever I do conferences, invariably somebody comes up to my table and they say, "You don't believe in this crap, do you?" And then I say, "Well, I like to keep an open mind." And then he'll laugh, walk around, and a few minutes later he'll come back to me and he'll say, "I have something to tell you." These are big guys, these are hunters and these are outdoorsmen. And they tell me a story that brings tears to their eyes. It has affected them systemically, emotionally, physically, and in many cases spiritually as well too. And they're usually nothing involving aggression. It's just a human being coming upon something that shouldn't be there.
Bigfoot that are seen here, you get the standard 7 to 8 feet tall. I don't want to say massive, because you don't get reports a lot of times of them being overly massively built like you get out in the Pacific Northwest, but larger than a man.
Massive shoulders, barrel-breasted chest, real thin hips or waist. Colors range from black, reddish brown, dark brown. There's been a couple of reports where it looks like it's completely black from head to toe. There's been some reports of it having like a salt and pepper type of color to it, like a graying, if you will.
Their arms are always down to their knees. Obviously big feet, that's why they call them Bigfoot. Extremely fast, extremely agile. Sometimes they smell like sulfur, rotten meat.
Some have been described as really thin, like almost like malnourished or lanky. Like there's no muscle mass, it's just like a wiry type of creature that's been seen.
But there are deviations from that too. There are people that say it's more man than animal. I think that's just projection. Most of the reports that we get have been of that ape-like creature within that 7 to 8 foot tall, and the sightings usually aren't anything significant more than just that, a sighting.
So sometimes these incidents, it's just a matter of seconds. People see these creatures walking across the road, going down near an embankment, going through a field, and they just seem to be meandering around, looking around.
People talk about, taking their quad around a corner and there's a Bigfoot crossing the path, and they don't know what to make of it. They start tearing up because it's so out of the ordinary.
In some cases, the creatures seem to have an interest in human activity.
We've had a couple where the animal's seen a more aggressive approaching houses, or more of a curious nature looking in windows, or spying on girls having a sleepover. That happened in 2010, I believe it was.
A lot of these houses are right butt up against the ridge, so these creatures will come near the house. There's been reports of them banging on the doors, banging on the houses, ripping electrical boxes up.
They seem to watch people, but generally, as soon as they're seen, they generally take off.
most part, they don't want to be seen. So if they're seen, they may get shot at, they may get killed. So they're not really going to make their presence known. They look through windows. They're very curious. That's the one characteristic about them. They're shy, but they're also very curious. When they feel they can, they will get close.
While Pennsylvania may seem a far cry from the idyllic Sasquatch habitat of the Pacific Northwest, there is historical precedent for the existence of the hairy hominid in the Keystone State.
There was one reference I actually noticed from 1895, and it talked about the wild man of the woods up near Bolivar. So that's right on the border of Westmoreland, Indiana County, on top of the ridge, where some type of creature was frightening the people that lived up there.
In the newspapers and media up here, they really do put that in the newspapers, whereas in other parts of Pennsylvania, they really don't put it in that much. But there's always been articles here about, I mean, we have reams binders of Chestnut Ridge articles.
But I found newspaper articles dating back to the 1800s where people talk about having encounters with wild men or wild beasts of the forests.
You know, there have been reports in more recent years and past years of all through that area of the ridge of people seeing something that they've referred to as a Bigfoot. So these things have been going on for a long time. And again, while we hear a lot of reports from Western Pennsylvania, there have been reports received from all over the state as well.
With decades of witness testimony, researchers have begun to piece together the jigsaw puzzle of Sasquatch behavior. Through this analysis, we can begin to try to understand what certain behaviors might mean and how they can help us find them.
What makes the Chestnut Ridge so great is it is a bit of a highway, isn't it? You can travel through 2 states without ever leaving the ridge. And I think that is something to be said. It's a great thoroughfare for animals that want to stay hidden from people, because nobody lives at the very top of the Chestnut Ridge, and it's a great way to get around. And if you think about how each season would have its particular produce, right? In the fall, you would have acorns galore. You would constantly have a supply of animals up there as well too, small game and large game both. There's plenty of water up there as well too, potable drinking water up there for humans as well. So it's a great way to use that as an access to and from.
It seems to me that the winter months are the most calm. You very seldom get any reports. If you do get some, it's very sparse. Summer, it's usually active, but it seems to be the fall that's the most active.
Some years we seem to get more things from mid to late spring all the way through November, and then the winter months are dead. Where other months in 2009 and 10, we had a dozen sightings that took place from November through February. And that makes no sense, because normally the norm is wintertime, nothing's going on.
I guess if we're talking about a flesh and blood creature that's covered in hair, you know, maybe it's cooler in the fall. They probably are more comfortable in the fall. Maybe they conserve more of their energy in the summer because it's hot and, you know, it's more laborsome for them to move around. I would imagine, you know, if I was out in heavy clothing and, you know, in the middle of July, it would probably be pretty uncomfortable. So I'm thinking that they probably just move more freely and are more comfortable in the fall months when it's cooler.
Well, of course, you always get more sightings during the nicer times of the year, during the spring and summer. That's typical. But I receive reports in all kinds of weather, whether it's the wintertime, during a snowstorm, and with UFOs as well, not just Bigfoot. We've had them on rainy days, we've had them during storms. Reports come in all year round. And again, it varies year by year. Some years you get more reports than others.
What I think happens, though, is that occasionally during these migratory periods, there are moments whenever they will stay for a bit longer, whether the food is good or whether the weather gets very bad. And then they needed to go outside of their comfort zone. And that's why they were coming more and more into towns and people were seeing them more often, is because in order to survive, they had to leave the ridge just to find food.
I know I've heard the reports from other researchers on migratory possible patterns. I've not seen this around here. It seems as though whatever we're dealing with, these things appear in all type of weather. They can show up whenever they want to, wherever they want to. And here's what's also very interesting. You know, over the years we talk about, well, a lot of these sightings occur in wooded, forested areas. A lot of them do. But over the years, and in more recent years, we're getting more reports near larger cities and more populated areas where there's not a lot of woods around. So where are these things coming from? Where are they going?
I think a lot of the seasonal is also based on how many people are out there. In the fall, you've got hunters. You have 900,000 registered hunters in Pennsylvania, right? There's more people out in the fall, more people out in the summer, hiking, doing things. Less people out, people start to come back out in the spring. So that could be it. It may not be just a migrational, but...
I don't think they're migratory. I think they have a home range up here on the ridge, and they move back and forth like a bear's territory. I think they have a home range that they stay in, and they move back and forth based on food, based on water, and of course based on people being out. So people out hiking, hunting, camping, whatever, that's going to push them either away or draw them in. And I think that's a big factor in what goes on up here.
So very near the Chestnut Ridge, we have the Connie River. And that is, it's a winding old river. But people see Bigfoot along that way all the way. So when we talk about the ridge being a natural highway, I think we can also say that waterways are natural highways as well too. Not that these creatures become semi-aquatic or anything, but I think that it's a way for them to get to place. It's almost, it's like a paved road. It leads to someplace. It's a trail marker. It allows them to get to someplace without having to cross a road. So I think that animals will use this river systems. There's food around the rivers, drinking water around the rivers as well. But it's just a great way to get from place to place without encountering anybody.
They always say that the creatures follow the waterways because, again, an animal needs water. And it would make sense that they would follow waterways. We see them, in some of the places that we research, they go by the lakes too. So lakes, creeks, definitely.
There's Sam Sherry's famous story at the Loyalhanna Creek at the spillway, where he's sitting, in his car, and this Bigfoot walks up to his car and gets face to face and I guess vocalizes and it gets the spittle on his face. Now Sam was a very interesting character, a legend in Bigfoot research, because he was one of the first people out there doing research on the ridge, sometimes by himself. He was a World War II veteran, he was wounded, but he had some incredible stories, right? Does this fit into the incredible story? I don't know. The creature looked more man-like than ape. He said it was sparsely covered in hair, it had a mohawk, and it waved to him as he was leaving. So take that what it is, at that point Sam told that story, he was a lot older too, so.
We get our share, creeks, ponds. Not far from here, Lake Donegal has had a number of sightings over the years around the lake itself. There's a lot of creeks and streams. Footprints have been found not far from here. I've investigated that case in 2020. Somebody found 10-inch footprints along the creek bed that went on for almost a mile and a half, and barefooted. Yeah, you can definitely see toes, and I've had Meldrum look at the video. He thought they might be human, but where they were walking doesn't make sense for a human to be walking. There's just too much rocks, leaf matter, sticks, unsafe ground, and many times they would seem to walk right into the creek and not come out on the other side. So why somebody would be doing that, I don't know. You can't rule out a person, but it just doesn't make sense.
Some of the areas where some of these things have been reported has a history of Native American activity. So there have been petroglyphs in the area, there have been alleged mounds or burial grounds in some areas over the years. So that's something that has come up in some of the cases that I've looked into over the years. Is it common in many of the reports? It is not. With cemeteries, yes, there have been sightings by UFOs and Bigfoot in cemeteries. This was an interesting case. So this would have been, I believe it was September of '73. During the big wave, there was a mother and a baby that went down to a cemetery to put some flowers on a grave that day. And the mother's watching the baby walking around, and she's hearing some baby sounds, like baby cry sounds. She thought they'd come from over the hill, and she's walking around, as I recall, and she looks up, and there's the edge of the woods close by, and here's this very large, hairy Bigfoot creature watching the child moving around, and the baby, I think, is making some baby crying sounds itself. And maybe it was attracted to the sound the baby was making. and it starts to slowly walk in that direction. The mother sees the creature, runs over, grabs the child, gets in the car, and goes to a relative's farm about 5 miles away. Here's what's really fascinating. Within the hour at the farm, the same or another Bigfoot shows up, which the animals are frightened. They took a shot at it. They called the state police. The witness and the child were so scared the state police escorted her home. My team was out there that night interviewing the people. We were at the cemetery, we were out at the farm, and that was not the only case I had where a Bigfoot seemed to have the capability to follow a person over.
Bigfoot sometimes have been linked to being around cemeteries. At night, they know that there's nobody there. I mean, let's face it, other than maybe some occasional ghost hunters, right? But
so, as an investigator of Bigfoot and dogman sightings, many of the places where I investigated have a cemetery quite near there. One particular place where I like to do my investigations has a cemetery that has been there for about 200 years. It's a quite ancient cemetery by American standards. But yeah, cemeteries and Bigfoot and hauntings and UFOs and dogmen, there always does seem to be.
There are a few. Again, the cemetery near Livermore that I was telling you about, there was a Bigfoot sighting there towards the evening. You know, I think throughout the ridge you'll get lots of stories of seeing Bigfoots at the edges of cemeteries. Not why, I have no idea. Does it add to a great story? I don't know. Where do you find a cemetery? Oftentimes near the woods, right? So it makes sense. I don't think they're there doing anything strange, but it's happened to be passing by.
Yeah, there's been a lot of sightings around cemeteries around here, and again, we don't know if there's a correlation or not, but that seems to be a prevalent thing. And it's usually people that are visiting loved ones in the cemetery, like an individual goes out, put flowers on the ground or whatever, and then has a sighting of a creature watching them from the tree line, or seeing one in the actual cemetery walking through. That's happened quite a bit around this area.
I've had multiple friends at work, you know, talk about different situations. It seems like, you know, anybody that spends any time in the woods around here has an experience, at least one, that they talk about. People that, you know, you never would have thought, and you know, you mentioned that now that I do the investigating and they know that I do that, some people come forward and be like, oh yeah, I have something that happened to me that I never told anybody about. I had a friend who was out parking with a girl and had 2 red eyes that he caught staring at him from in the trees that just disappeared, you know. I had a friend that was a hunter he's very much a skeptic, but he says that he was in an area, and it's all on Chestnut Ridge, just different parts of it. He had a real guttural scream on a super cold day that there was no other sound. You know, it was one of those dead quiet in the woods he was hunting, and this guttural scream, and he goes, I have no idea. I've never heard anything like that in all my years hunting. And just a lot of people telling stories like that.
there was one gentleman that we talked to. This was an interesting one. Luxor, out in town of Luxor. He was with his girlfriend to be wife. They were in the woods, and I'm not going to elaborate. You can kind of guess, you know. So they get up, they start to walk. All of a sudden, they run straight. This creature was walking. It must have been turned. It walked almost right into them. Almost right into them. And it stopped. The eyewitnesses stopped. And of course, they're both terrified. And the interesting thing about this, the Bigfoot kind of stopped. And they said he was close enough that he saw the blood go into his eyes and the eyes turn red. That's how close he was to it. He said this thing screamed, and he said this scream was like a sonic pulse. It hit him in the chest. It was so loud. The creature went one way, and the gentleman and his wife went the other way. And the interesting thing about the eyes red, we had in 73 in Beaver County, there was this sighting that we took from a gentleman. He was a child then, and they were in a trailer. So he was playing, and he sees movement out of the side of his eye, and he looks at the window, and he said, this creature, he saw it from the side. He says the creature turned, and it looked at him. He says, then the eyes went red. He said, Brian, those eyes weren't red, until this creature saw me. Then they glowed red. Is that red eye shine kind of like a defense mechanism? Hey, you know, boom, I'm gonna do this to try to scare you, because certain animals, they'll do certain things to try to scare you, to show. And it like kind of grinned it, like growled, and then it walked away. And he was scared. He went to his dad, and later on, I think the next day, the police came down and they found some really huge prints close to that.
Aggressive encounters with Bigfoot can be looked at in a couple of ways, I think. I think that when we talk about a territoriality, especially if this is a great ape of some kind, that we could talk about things such as bluff charges. You know, I've had a stick thrown at me before. I was out on a family outing one time, not even considering Bigfoot, and we had a rock thrown at us from the woods. So I think that a lot of times that we consider aggression is more territorial, is trying to get you out of the woods. But I've never encountered anybody that has been attacked by a Bigfoot.
I would say watcher and wants to just be left alone. I mean, to me, I don't see or hear of too many sightings of where it got physical. You know, maybe a bluff growl or something to scare you away, but, you know, and I think that happened up towards Jamonsville several years back, to where there was a couple walking and they saw something, and it just, you know, like a bluff charged, and pretty much scared them enough that,
you know, over the years, I've investigated hundreds of Bigfoot sightings in this area in Pennsylvania. And I talked to many, many people, many hunters who have come across, have seen these creatures. Most of these people had never believed it until they had their own encounter, because most of these people used to laugh at these stories. And for many of these people, it was a life-changing experience. But I've had a lot of people tell me, and hunters tell me over the years, that for what they saw, and as close as they were in some cases, these creatures, these things easily could have outran them. They could easily have hurt them if they wanted to, but that didn't seem to be the case. Again, in some cases, yes, they'd thrown very large rocks towards them or big branches, but generally when they were seen, they turned and ran. And even though I don't recommend people shooting at them, during that 73 outbreak, and over the years since, but during 73, there were a number of people that fired upon these things with various type of weapons. Some of them were pretty high-powered weapons. But you've had many people who fired these things, but there was no reaction from the creatures. They didn't seem to be harmed in any way. Or they fell down and got up and walked away. And as different people told me, they said these things wanted to hurt them. I mean, they easily could have done it at that time, and they didn't.
My name is Connie Brinker. I've lived in this area all my life. I've worked specifically in the Chestnut Ridge area for the last 8 years on midnight shift. My brother is Eric, and growing up, he was always into Bigfoot. We would always go outside and look for UFOs. When we heard about the sightings back in the 70s and 80s, we would always see Stan Gordon at different places growing up, and, you know, Eric always looked up to him. And I was never so much into the Bigfoot or the UFOs. I thought it was neat, but I was all into the ghosts and spiritual things. But after my sighting, I had no turning back. May 20th of 2021, my partner and I were driving in the ambulance, and it was 12 o'clock at night, and we were coming to Indian Head, and we were just chit-chatting. And the way that we sit in the ambulance, we sit higher than the dashboard. So the way that the windshield is, it was kind of flat. And just, we both saw it wasn't out of the corner of our eye. The way the headlights were aiming was down a little, but we saw something black, all black, head to toe, run across the road in 3 steps. We couldn't see shoes, no socks, just all black. And the way it ran looked what I describe as like when you're gonna do the triple jump and you do that real high step, that's what it looked like. went in 3 steps, it was across the road. Instantly, my hair on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't see anything off to my right going up a very steep embankment. And I didn't want to say anything to my partner at first, but I finally said, "Did you just see that?" And he said, "Yes." I wasn't going to say anything either. And we just started talking about it. I immediately called my husband and said, "We just saw something cross the road." And I'm not saying it was Bigfoot, but it was Bigfoot. Because I'm shorter, I could not see how tall it was, but my partner said it was over our ambulance, so 7 to 8 feet tall. Just very odd.
The sighting happened on this side of the road. So it came across here to their yard and went right up over the hill here.
What did this thing look like again?
According to the witnesses, it was large, about their guess being about 7 or 8 feet, black. They couldn't really tell, you know, as far as if it had fur or what, but they said that it crossed this road in about 3 steps. And this road measures at about 24 feet across.
The way it ran, I've never, like you see the Patterson-Gimlin film and you've seen other videos, this was not how this thing ran, but it was almost like it was trying to get out of our headlights very quickly. I messaged Eric, my brother, and he said I can meet you in the morning. So when I was done with work in the morning, I went home and changed. We went immediately back up. We found where the grass was matted down, exactly where the thing went up the hill. And they were shaped like footprints. We couldn't see any outline, you know, like discernible in mud footprints, but the grass was pushed down. While we were watching, or, you know, looking for that area and trying to investigate, we heard a very loud, long howl on the little ridge across the street. And Eric said, "Okay, I have no doubt." So to this day, I still get those chills. I've never had anything like that. I've always wanted to believe. I've heard sounds, you know, you hear the stories. But once I saw that, I have no doubt at all what I saw. And
Sean, were you aware of this case? Or?
No, this was new to me. I just found out about it when we were coming up. But I just took it across the road, and it took me probably 20 steps to get across the road. Watch yourself. Wow.
The river's over this direction, right?
When you say river,
There's a big body of water over here, correct?
that I am not sure of.
Okay.
There may be a creek or something over there.
Okay. I just feel like I can see the field there, and I feel like right over on the other side of the field, there's like a fairly large body of water, but I wouldn't know unless I was looking at it.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of that.
I've never had anything like that. I've always wanted to believe. I've heard sounds, you know, you hear the stories. But once I saw that, I have no doubt at all what I saw. And it took me a long time to build up the courage to, you know, tell other people. But at this point, it needs to be known that it's out there. You know, like I said, I was a skeptic. I could kind of say, well, that sound maybe was a coyote or, you know, something else, but not now. One other experience that happened with all of that is in the center console of the ambulance, it's all lit up green because that's where all our switches are for the emergency lights and the siren. And right after that happened, all of the green light went out. That has never happened since. But all the lights went, it got completely dark in our ambulance, like there was an electrical disturbance, and then it came back on. Very pungent, almost dead animal and rotting flesh mix. Like the dead animal, I want to say, when I smell like a dead deer, you could tell it's a dead deer. but I've been on calls with people and it's different. It's just dead. But when we came back through to check out where everything had happened, no smell, it was gone. After Eric came up to investigate, he went back a few days later and put signs up in some of the local markets. And he called me and said they had talked to the one market owner, and that the owner said that someone else came in a few days before my sighting and said they had also seen something cross the road in the same area. But I didn't know that at the time of my sighting.
There are so many different aspects of this phenomena that I've been looking into for years and years that most people don't know about. One of the things is the electromagnetic effects. You know, for years and years with UFO cases, especially in the 50s and the 60s, we'd hear reports of these large, solid physical objects, big discs that would hover over people's cars, follow them. But sometimes when they're close to the vehicle, the car would begin to lose power, or the headlights would begin to fade, and when the vehicles would move off, the power would come back on. Well, we've had some incidents where the same thing happened with a Bigfoot when it was near a vehicle. For example, a Bigfoot walking out in front of a car, and as the creature's moving close by, the car begins to lose power, it moves away, the power comes back to normal. I had one case years ago of these people riding down the road, come around the bend, and this huge Bigfoot creature just suddenly appears out of nowhere. They should have been able to see it where they were. It just suddenly appears, has very long arms and legs. They had to swerve around it not to hit it. And as they were right near it, the car lost power. And the other person is yelling, get out of here, get out of here. And as the driver's gassing the car, it seems as more this person pushed down the gas pedal, the slower the car would go. And now they finally slowly got away from it. As they got further away from it, the power came back on normal. But also, another interesting thing that's going on. This actually goes back years ago with witnesses that had both a film camera as well as digital cameras. And at times they would attempt to take a picture of a UFO and the camera would malfunction. But the same thing has been going on over the years from people who try to take pictures with a Bigfoot and sometimes other cryptids. And it gets even stranger than that, because I've had people in recent years tell me that, for example, they saw some evidence that the creature had been there. So there might be a footprint, for example, and people have gone over to try to take a picture of the physical evidence and the camera would malfunction. It had worked fine previously. Right before that, when they tried to take a picture, it would not work. They would go home and the camera worked fine.
We've got Ricky Turby, Ron Murphy, Tom, which you've already met, Connie, and her husband's. Hi. Hope you're going to meet us.
He
Seth,
is
Heather,
just out of his meeting, so he might have to meet us up there. I work out of the station, and I come out here at night once in a while just to walk around because we're very slow. And I work on the ambulance, I'm a paramedic. And I've heard noises coming from that ridge. Like, it almost sounds like an owl, but it's very long, like a, I can't whistle, but, and it's loud. We hear owls and they call back and forth to each other all the time, but this wasn't an owl. I told him about it, and I said, we actually go wheeling up in that area, we should go check it out. So I took them up there one night, and out of my peripheral vision, my husband was driving, I saw something black cross the road. And this was different than my other sighting. It could have been a bear, a deer, I don't know. So we stopped to check it out, and he gets out his thermal camera and clearly looks like a deer on the thermal imaging down in the woods.
So much stuff happened in such a short period of time. We weren't expecting it. I mean, when we got out and she'd stopped the Jeep, her husband stopped the Jeep, and he came back and said, you know, we just saw something cross, and Connie saw something cross in front of the Jeep. We got out, I got my thermal out, we went down to where she thought it crossed. I was looking at something big and stationary that looked low to the ground, and I couldn't make out from my angle what it was. they assumed it was a deer.
But as we're checking this thing out, my husband sees balls of light in the trees, and then we hear a wood knock not 50 feet behind us. Across
the road from us.
Right behind Tom, and he didn't even hear it.
We thought it was Tom doing it because it was that close, but Tom was actually in my cab of my truck looking for a flashlight. So when we turned to look, we could see him, and there was nobody else across the road.
Then we heard a whistle, and we heard something walking through the trees. Didn't see anything on thermal. Turned back around to look back down where we saw this. I thought it was a deer. It was gone. I don't know. So as we went up the road further, my husband and I heard a loud moan with all of our windows up. So again, we started slowing down, looking around, and something hit the side of my Jeep. Sounded like wet wood. It wasn't a rock. It did not leave a mark. And there was the mud still on my Jeep. Nothing disturbed the mud. So I don't know what it was.
When was this?
What, 3 weeks
3 weeks
ago?
This is that recent. Okay.
Yes.
That's
So
why we're going there tonight.
we stopped again, and down because I saw a flash down in the woods to my right, and there was a path that went down in, like a very wide clearing, and this flash then dimmed down to the size of what it looked like a lightning bug, and it just stayed there. It didn't move, and we're watching this thing, and all of a sudden we heard footsteps coming up that path right to my Jeep, and I said, nope, we're out. There was nothing there. It was bright out. We couldn't see anything. So I don't know. The place is creepy. I don't know.
We're going to go up towards the Laurel Ridge, which is a little bit further east of the Chestnut Ridge. Not much, but we're going to come down Jim Mountain Road into this area, and we're going to stop and check this area. We come out a week later, and there was such a crazy vibe up there that I can't explain it. It just felt like we shouldn't be there, and everybody got creeped out.
Something was watching us.
Yeah, we were all just, I don't get spooked easily.
Yeah.
But it was just like, okay, we need to go.
Yeah.
We'll take one group down to the lower parking area where the cemetery is, and one group up on the upper part, just up the hill from where. Set up here with some parabolic mics and thermal, and send the other team down with another thermal, a monocular. And did you bring your night vision?
I have mine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got night vision.
Right. I got mine with me too. So. Thank you. So I have a Zoom H2N recorder attached to a tripod with a parabolic mic.
Where'd you come up with this setup?
Just put it together myself.
Really?
Yeah. This comes off. You can actually take this and carry it around. It's mobile.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's mobile. But I also have at home a parabolic mic that's used in professional football games on the sidelines to capture players' sounds and stuff. But that's too cumbersome to take out.
Sure. Can the other team hear that?
Negative.
They can't. I think where we're positioned at down here, I don't think it's going to be very conducive for that because it always, you know, we're in like a little kettle.
Yeah. You might actually be better off on the other side of the road because you're going to be more on the...
Did you?
It has to be.
It has to be.
Eric.
Did they just knock?
Yeah, they were
Got one. I thought we had the clearest wood knocks ever captured. So what are we doing right now?
I think we're going to go. He thought, Josh thought he heard something coming up from this area. So I thought if we would go around the bend right here, it kind of have it bookended, you know. So we'll go up to this area. The other team is down at the graveyard. So if there's going to be anything that's happening, it might all funnel down here and capture something on the parabolic dish.
Do you get nervous out in the woods?
Oh, I do. I think that that's just part of who we are as human beings. You know, we're used to electricity and we're used to... You heard that.
That had to be them,
right? 9:46. 9:46.
9:46. We just heard it very clear.
It was just one.
Is that abnormal? If it was them doing a call?
Yeah. Usually whenever researchers come out here, they kind of go overboard and kind of inundate the landscape with, you know, either knocks or howls to try to get whatever's out here stirred up. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Now we heard one very distinct howl and two very faint wood knocks. From our perception here, it looks like it's coming from that hollow. I mean, that's what it looks like. I'll tell you what, let's go up about another 100 yards and then we'll be pretty far. It'll be a completely different perspective. And then let's try to do a wood knock from up there.
So, I see there's a car coming.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
That's extremely interesting.
So there's other people up here.
Mm-hmm. People were partying down there too because I found another bottle. So
there you go.
You hear that?
Oh yeah. That's coming right through here.
Yep.
So we got movement now.
Yeah. Okay, so that was movement we heard. As we were walking up here, we sounded like something shifted. So whatever is moving up there, it's not making any deliberate steps, but it's definitely following us. Let's try another wood knock. Where would you suggest I do it?
Well, up here's going to be difficult. I mean, you could do that on that.
On that tree, going. So you were with our group then. The guy came from Greensburg.
Yeah, I'm with Connie.
Oh,
yep.
okay. We didn't know what was going on. So where was the incident happen? Where did your incident happen?
The initial one is probably a couple hundred yards further back that way past where Eric's parked.
Okay.
And then the other one was right up here, and I can't remember exactly where. That's why I was going up to pinpoint it again.
Can you tell right now, are they directly basically over this hill down there?
There's a little bit of a valley between you, yeah, but they are.
But they're right
yeah,
down there.
like,
Okay.
If you can see the mountain line on that other side over there, they're kind of on halfway up it, on a shelf over there.
Okay, because we've been hearing noise over there, and I couldn't tell.
Well,
if
they
them.
did a knock,
Yeah.
like a little bit ago, right before I came up.
They do a call, do you know?
I don't know.
Do you don't have a walkie-talkie?
No, I have one, but I don't know if anybody else is on. My wife has the opposite one.
13. Try 13.
I don't. Mine are only 2 channels.
Okay.
These are ones we use for our stuff, but
Yeah. Yeah, we got there was a very clear vocalization of some sort earlier, but it was in that direction, so I'm assuming it was them.
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just gonna walk up to ride up here real quick, and we might just sit quiet for a couple minutes.
Cool.
But yeah, then up here is where we had we were driving and we heard something like almost like a loud whistle or something. So we stopped for a while, and then that's when we had something walking up the hill but couldn't see anything. And then just as we pulled out, it was like something hit the side of our vehicle, like something threw like a piece of wet wood or something and hit the side of the vehicle.
Something going on?
Yeah, something kind of weird.
What's up?
Ricky's down at the other location, and every time he whistles, they're getting a response that sounds like someone taking a fork and tapping it against a glass bottle. Like it's going tink, tink, tink. But it's only when he whistles.
Did they do a call earlier?
Yeah, they've done a couple, yeah.
A single call?
No, they were doing whoops.
See?
We didn't hear that.
Yeah, we didn't hear that.
And I think we have a really clear call then.
Good.
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking that what we heard was coyote or anything.
No, absolutely. It was one. It was just one single.
And it wasn't a whoop. It was like
a long drawn out.
No.
Not even drawn. No.
It was so mundane sounding that it was like I just assumed, well, they must have just goofed off and they're just doing a single call. But it wasn't a whoop. It was like
they're doing 2 to 3 whoops.
Rusted swing or a rusted chain swinging, but it's only like tink, tink, tink.
That's a ghost down there.
All right, keep us posted. They did some knocks, and they're in that direction down there, but the knocks are echoing through the valley, carrying up here. So you're hearing like a knock, knock, knock.
Yeah.
And it's a specific hollow sound because he's using an axe handle. He's done 3 or 4 sets of them. We can hear them, and then they've done a couple of whoop calls, and they're just short whoop, whoop, and that's it.
No, that's not what we heard.
We haven't done any calls up here. I haven't done any wood knocks. So it's just us kind of standing here.
This was a lot. How many minutes? That was like 20 minutes ago or something.
9:46. 9:46.
Yeah, we wrote down the time exactly, just because I don't know if they're gonna memorize when they did it or whatever. But
and the only people that we sent your way was Chris and Josh.
Yeah,
in the
we saw
truck,
them.
and they were going to turn around and come back.
Did you guys hear a whistle? Was it them?
I didn't hear a whistle. So we're talking. Did you guys whistle?
Did you just hear that shit?
Yeah, did you hear that? That jingling.
Yeah.
What was that?
Did you guys just do a whistle?
Or jingle?
No.
Weirdness on the Chestnut
There it
Ridge.
is again?
Yeah. Listen.
I'm confused as to how that wasn't you guys.
I heard chimes this side over here. So.
No, this wasn't chimes.
No, there it goes. See, it just got bigger.
Yeah, there it is.
Did it get bigger?
It just got bigger.
Yeah.
Right here. Yeah.
Did you see the light?
No, there's a light back there.
That's probably Eric.
Okay, but
yeah, but that's not what happened over here.
There was a light coming towards us.
Yeah.
And then a light. It looked like a truck pulling in an intersection.
Yes.
It looked like.
Okay, well, I just have one 10 feet inside the woods, right next to me.